And
Pressure's on.
and before we begin here, I'll just say a couple quick words. So Connor and I go way back all the way to high school. Um, he has just recently graduated from UMass and is now down at Austin P State University in Tennessee, doing a lot of cool work with Gila monsters, which he'll be I'm sure he'll be speaking on later at some point. But for those of you who've been in the Wildlife Society for a while, you may have remembered Connor was our former president, was really awesome. Fortunately, his last semester is when COVID all started, so we had a bunch of cool events planned out, and that all got canceled. So we're really happy to have Connor here tonight, and he's going to give an awesome talk about this really cool opportunity through the Wildlife Society. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn the Zoom microphone over to Connor. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure we can just keep that as informative as possible, and don't hesitate to type in the chat or to reach out or to just speak up. So I'm going to stop talking, and Connor, this is all yours.
Cool. Yeah. Can I ask George or any of the other officers to kind of monitor chat and stuff? I can't really see it while I'm presenting, so I'll just
I can take care of that.
Just speak up and yell out questions. Doesn't matter. Let me share my screen with y'all so you can y'all kind of see what I'm seeing at least. Somebody shout yes. Good. Thumbs up. All right, sick. So hi guys. So as George said, my name is Connor Hughes, and I was the former president of the Wildlife Society at UMass. Your officers asked me to come down and talk a little bit about the opportunity for the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate through the Wildlife Society National Organization, since I recently just got that. Yeah, I kind of want to keep this talk as informal as possible. Anybody who has questions at any point, just speak up and we can go over stuff. I'm not super sure. There's not a ton of information to talk about with the certificate itself. So yeah, I think I'm mostly here as a resource for you guys. So I've got some stuff to talk about, but again, feel free to interrupt at any time and just ask questions or whatever. So I kind of wanted to lay out sort of the structure of my talk. I want to start by doing a little bit of introductions on who I am and what I've done in the past, just so people have that in the back of their mind as I'm kind of giving my spiel. Because like I said, I want to be here as a resource tonight for things about the certificate and things beyond the certificate, whether that's involved with just the field of wildlife biology in general, about getting internships and jobs, about grad school, which is what I'm currently doing with my life, what the process is like to apply for that, what it's like to be in grad school, anything like that. So again, really just want to be a resource for you guys here tonight. So again, just keep that in mind as I'm kind of giving my spiel. So as George said, I was at UMass from 2016 to 2020. I graduated last year with a degree in natural resource conservation, concentrating in wildlife and fisheries biology and conservation. I took both tracks because I'm a masochist, really. But yeah, no, great time. I also got a minor in geographical information systems in the geosciences department at UMass, which is great. I was really involved with Wildlife Society my freshman year, and then my sophomore year, I sort of became vice president midway through the year, because we had a bunch of people leave due to study abroad programs. And then I officially became vice president my junior year, and then kind of flowed into naturally being the president senior year when all the rest of that cohort left and graduated. But we had a lot of cool stuff going on while I was there, and kind of helped grow the club. And COVID kind of messed up at the end there, but hopefully next year things are more able to be done in person, and you guys can get back doing really cool events with Wildlife Society, because again, this is one of my favorite parts of my time at UMass. What else have I done other than my time at UMass? Quite a bit, actually. in 2017, which was the summer after my freshman year, I worked in Alaska doing fishery science work. So essentially while I was there, I was monitoring populations of sockeye salmon and other salmonids up in the Pacific Northwest, which are really important subsistence fisheries. So people go out and locals fish for them. And yeah, the ages back, the populations crashed, but Alaska's monitoring program has kind of gotten them up to good numbers again, where they can sort of be harvested and used. So that's one aspect of fishery science that's really important. And that kind of got my love started for field work as well. In 2018, which was the next summer, I was down in Georgia doing sea turtle monitoring. So I was monitoring nesting populations of loggerhead sea turtles, doing some genetic work with them, doing some spatial research with them, a bunch of fun stuff there. Just going cool places, doing cool things. That kind of led to the following summer. I was a telemetry technician for the American Turtle Observatory. I was actually working kind of all across Western Massachusetts, monitoring freshwater and terrestrial turtles, some of which have pretty high conservation statuses, and just, just exploring cool places. And yeah, that the next summer, my final summer, so last summer, I was an amphibian monitoring technician for USGS's NE Army, so the Northeast Amphibian Research and Monitoring Initiative, where I was monitoring vernal pools across the northeastern US, mostly in Massachusetts, as well as different populations of amphibians throughout the state for salamander chytrid fungus and B-sal, which are two fungal pathogens that are one is in the US currently, and the other is in Europe that we're really worried about it spreading to the US. So we swap stuff and just sort of try to keep an eye on that and monitor that. So done a lot of work in the past. Currently, I'm a graduate student at the Ginger Herpetology Lab at Austin Peay State University. I'm getting my master's here, so I'll be here, I guess 2020 to 2022, but that's fine. Yeah, so it's a 2-year program. I'm going to be here doing thesis research the whole time, and I'm having a great time. We study mostly Gila monsters, which are these cool venomous lizards in the southwestern US, in the deserts. They're actually one of 2 venomous species of lizard that we have in the world, and the only one that we have in the US. And so they're really, really neat critters to work with. And I mostly focus on the spatial ecology and sort of modeling side of things with them. But actually in the next, next Wednesday, I'm flying out to Las Vegas to start my field season working with them. And I'm very fortunate that I'm able to do that in the current environment of things going on, but I'll be there for 5 months, sort of running around the desert looking for these guys. But yeah, so without further ado, that's sort of who I am, just my background. And yeah, so talking about the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate through the Wildlife Society, I wanted to start with just sort of an overview of the certificates that the Wildlife Society issues as a general statement. So the Wildlife Biologist Certificate is actually issued at 2 different levels. I'm mostly going to be focusing on the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate now, just because that's the one that people who are graduating from UMass would be applying for. But the other level would be the Certified Wildlife Biologist Certificate. So the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate only requires educational requirements, so coursework basically, versus the Certified Wildlife Biologist Certificate, which requires both the base coursework of the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate and at least 5 years experience working in the field after graduating with your bachelor's degree. So that's why I'm not really focusing on it now. That'd be sort of the next step after you get this thing. But so the educational requirements for the associate degree, the associate certificate is 81 semester hours, so 81 credits spread across 11 specified categories. And I'll talk about that later. The certificate also expires in 10 years. So sort of once you have the certificate, once you graduate and get it, you'd have 10 years to get that 5 years experience working in the field to apply and sort of upgrade to the Certified Wildlife Biologist Certificate. And then once you have that, you need to just renew it every 5 years. So anybody who applies for either of these certificates needs to be a current member of the Wildlife Society in all capitals. And what I mean when I say that is I mean the national organization, not just the student chapter or the state chapter. If you're not already a member of that, it's very easy to sign up for that, and I'm sure your officers could help you do that. It's just a small yearly fee. It's like, I think, $42 for students to become a member of the national chapter, and that's sort of the professional organization for people involved in wildlife society, for people involved in wildlife fields. So there are definitely benefits to that, and you get like a quarterly magazine about stuff happening in the field. So that's neat. And then once you submit your application, it's evaluated by the Certificate Review Board at the Wildlife Society, which is basically a set of people who are already certified, set of wildlife professionals who kind of evaluate and say, okay, is this legit, essentially? And yeah. So I just got my certificate in the mail, I think back in January. So just so you know, I do know what I'm talking about, because I just very recently went through this application process. And yeah, see, it looks nice. You get a nice little letter saying, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about, and a nice emblem too. Very cool, very fun and professional. But that's what it looks like. So what are the actual benefits to getting this certification? Why can't I just graduate with my degree in wildlife biology and then go out into the field and get a job and make money? You can do that, essentially. But these are the benefits that are stated on the Wildlife Society's website, basically. They say that it conveys that an individual has relevant knowledge and skills to be a wildlife biologist. So essentially saying that you're accredited by your organization, so this person is legit. It's not a super rigorous certificate to get, but it does have specific requirements, which having this certificate on your resume is a good way to say like, oh yes, I have done all of these things that my professional organization has stated are the things that I should have done to be a legitimate wildlife biologist. You stand out for hiring, promotion, and salary considerations. That's partially true. Anytime you have any type of additional certificate on your resume, usually it's not a bad thing. It's almost never a bad thing to have additional qualifications compared to some other guy. So if you and another candidate for a hiring had the exact same skill set, the exact same work experience, but you had the certificate and they didn't, then you'd obviously stand out above them. And that's a very easy decision for an employer to make. I will say that not all fields of wildlife biology probably value this the same, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. But yeah, it says credibility as a professional in your field. So again, that's very similar to the first point. It's basically saying, okay, yeah, I'm accredited, so I'm legit. I'm not just this Joe Schmo who got a degree and haven't done anything with it. I kind of know what I'm doing. And then it complements or demonstrates state and federal agency requirements. So this one's actually important. It's specific. So when you apply for state or federal wildlife jobs, they're part of what's called the 486 series. So all federal jobs actually have specific educational requirements that you need to meet to apply for those jobs. And they're usually down to specific categories of coursework, essentially analogous to what you're doing to apply for this certificate. So what this is saying is that this certificate has the same requirements or even additional requirements compared to those federal application requirements. So this is a very easy way for if you're applying for a federal job, you don't have to pull out your old transcripts and be a pain to figure out do I meet all these requirements here, there, yes, no, the other thing. This is a very easy way to say, nope, I did this, this covers it. And so that's a pretty good thing. So as I was saying earlier, some fields of wildlife biology probably value something like this a lot more than others, which is important to consider when you're thinking about trying to go for this. For example, consulting firms probably value a certificate like this pretty high. Consulting firms are private agencies that people hire out contracted to do things like environmental impact statements and survey for rare wildlife and stuff like that. Essentially, if say I wanted to, I don't know, say I was a contractor who wanted to build a wind farm on some plot of land, I'd have to hire a consulting agency to do some monitoring for maybe rare bats that might be there that my wind turbines would potentially have an impact on. So because they're a private agency, they often value stuff like this more than some other types of field jobs and stuff like that. And then state and federal wildlife jobs also, this is good for because of what I said earlier, which is it's a very easy way to show that you have already met the educational requirements that those jobs need, which is pretty good. So what's the application process like? So first you have to meet all the academic requirements. That's the whole application basically, and I'll get into that on the next slide, what those actual requirements are. And then you fill out and submit the application online. It involves sending in your complete transcript. You cannot apply for this until you have completed your bachelor's degree. So it'll be at the end of your 4 years at UMass that you do this. And then it involves 3 letters of recommendation, including from at least one person who is already accredited by the Wildlife Society as either an associate wildlife biologist or a certified wildlife biologist. This is actually sometimes a difficult thing to do because you find that a lot of the people who your professors are, they got jobs in this field and they started doing things in this field before this was even really a thing. And so because they already had kind of good positions, they didn't really need to get this additional certification. So you kind of, what I found, at least when I was going to people, is I found a lot of people who were like, oh yeah, I could very easily do this, but I never got around to doing the application because it's not a high priority for me. But I am now accredited by the Wildlife Society. And I know that Todd Fuller, Dr. Fuller, who you, I think, heard from some of you at least last week, is accredited by the Wildlife Society too. And he's actually who I got to write my letter of recommendation. So, and then the other 2 can be just from people in the field. So past bosses, professors, things like that. And then there are, unfortunately, as there always is, associated fees with the application process. So like I said earlier, you need to be a member of the National Wildlife Society or that national organization to even apply for this, which is a $42 a month, $42 a year annual membership. And that's the student membership. I think it goes up to, yeah, it goes up to 82 if you're not a student or a recent graduate. I'm still paying the 42 because I'm a student. So that's a small yearly fee that's associated with this. And then there is a $95 fee for the actual application itself, assuming you're a recent graduate. Otherwise, it goes up to $115. So it is beneficial to you as individuals trying to apply to this to sort of have all your ducks in a row and be pretty certain that you're going to pass the review board's, analysis of your classes and stuff before you send in this application, because it is, I mean, $95 isn't nothing. That's a pretty chunky fee to apply for something. So yes. Then once your application is in and you've paid your fee, you paid your dues, the application is evaluated by that review board that I talked about earlier. So that set of already accredited wildlife biologists, and it usually takes about 6 months to receive a decision from them. So I think I applied in June or something like that, and I got my response back in December or January or something along those lines. So yeah, that's what to expect. So what are the actual academic requirements for this certificate? As I said, it's a bunch of credits spread across a bunch of different categories. And this is sort of what that breakdown looks like. So about a little more than half of the credits are in what's this branch, this umbrella category of biological sciences. So that's 36 credits associated with this. And that breaks down even further to some specific categories within that. So wildlife management, wildlife biology, ecology, zoology, botany. And there's some specific classes like for wildlife biology, at least one of those courses that are in that category must be ornithology, herpetology, or mammalogy. So one of the big ologies. Beyond that, they want you to have at least one course in basic statistics, and then another 9 courses in quantitative sciences. Quantitative sciences can include your basic math classes. They can include some high-level coding courses, depending on how you swing it. They can include high-level statistics courses that you aren't using for basic statistics. Pretty general category. Then you have humanities and social sciences. This is going to be most of your gen eds that fall into this. So anything that's not science related, your arts, your histories, your, I'm forgetting what UMass called them, but the global and the United States diversity things, those would probably fall into the humanities and social sciences category too. Basically anything non-science. Then you have communications. Communications is kind of the most tricky category on this whole application, and it does become a pain for some people. I know it was a pain for me. It was a pain for at least George, and I think Nat had dealt with some issues here. And this is the reason, because communications courses often do not count towards the communications category. Not intuitive, I know. Basically, what the Wildlife Society wants when they put the communications category is courses that are designed to improve an individual's communications with the public or with each other or with the world. So this includes both of your writing courses. So your freshman writing and your junior writing courses go towards this communications requirement, which is half your credits already, I believe. Some other types of courses that both would or would not apply to communications. Things that would not apply to communications are courses designed to study communications, but not necessarily to improve them, which is most of the courses in the communications major. Some of them, like a public speaking course, would count towards communications. I've found that many of the courses in the journalism major actually do count towards communications because they're specifically designed to help improve communication with the public, and there's like a big writing aspect. Even stuff like social media management. I know there's a couple courses at UMass for that sort of stuff. That would apply to this. Anything that's really helping you better articulate yourself. So again, public speaking, that's a shoo-in. And I know there's a ton of public speaking courses at UMass, both in and out of the NRC department. One sec. Finally, the last category is policy, administration, and law. Now, what's going to fall into this is any policy course. So there are wildlife policy courses at UMass, I believe. Charlie Schwick teaches the policy course still. And then you're going to need another additional course on top of that. And the other types of courses that fall into this policy, administration, and law courses is any type of decision-making course. So I believe there are IEs at UMass that things like environmental decision-making and stuff like that also fit into this category. But yeah, so that's kind of what you want to focus on there. So I want to take a second to kind of exit my presentation here and look at something that I made while I was at UMass, which was this this Excel spreadsheet, I think George has them to send out to people if they're interested. But basically what I went and I did is when I don't know if the course requirements have changed, but I took the NRC Wildlife Biology tract and I went through and I took all the courses that are required for you to graduate. And I figured out what they would potentially classify as and what additional courses or gen eds you might need to take to get this certificate. And so it's a dynamic spreadsheet. So you fill in your course and you fill in the numbers here, and it'll tell you down here, how many additional credits you need in each category to get things going. Because this is already filled out, it says 0 or negative numbers, and that's a little meaningless, but it does mean that we can cover things without that many additional courses, actually. So I know before it changed a little bit, the certificate programs requirements, our curriculum was originally designed to be able to apply for the certificate without taking any additional courses. And then the requirements changed a bit, so that changed, but yeah. So one of the biggest things about the certificate is how it handles general biology credits, which is a little weird because there's no general biology category when you go for your application. Basically what it does is it takes your general biology credits and it sums them and it divides them between zoology and botany. I don't know why it chose those categories, but half of your credits for general biology go into each of those categories. So that's something to think about. The other thing to think about when you're deciding courses at UMass is that you can't double book courses and categories. So for example, I couldn't say, I want to use herpetology in both my zoology and in my wildlife biology categories, even though hypothetically it could fit into either or of those categories. So you can't double book classes, but you can kind of finagle things into different categories depending on how you do things. Things are a little flexible, I guess. So basically when you write out your application, what you have to do is you put, of course, the course title, the course number, usually the catalog description, and then you usually write a supplemental description of the course. So if herpetology's catalog description was the study of amphibians and reptiles, and that was it. That's how a lot of catalog descriptions are. They're pretty vague. And then you write, well, in this class, we did this, and the other thing, and that's why it fits in this category. So depending on how you write your descriptions and what you choose to focus on, obviously don't lie, but we cover a lot of things in a lot of different classes, and you might be able to fit them in different categories depending on how you sort of swing things. Based on at least the NRC wildlife tract courses, there's only 2 additional courses that you really need to worry about taking when you're doing things. Now you want to focus on how you actually do your gen ed requirements too, because those play a role here. But in addition to what's on the actual curriculum, there's only 2 additional things that you need to take. So again, we start off with, everybody has to take 2 intro bio electives. Some people choose to take botany, and I'll get into that later. You can take 1 intro bio and then botany as well. That's fine as well. I've accounted for that. You can take your wildlife management is filled up by fish conservation and management, which I believe Dr. Danilchuk teaches. Dynamics and management of wildlife populations, which I think Scott teaches, Dr. Jackson, sorry. Wildlife habitat management, which Dr. Paige Warren teaches. So that kind of fills up your category there. Within wildlife biology, you're going to do wildlife sampling and ID. whatever you choose for your first animal biology elective, which is going to be either mammalogy, ornithology, or herpetology. I guess only mammalogy and ornithology at UMass now. And then wildlife conservation, which is Dr. Fuller still teaching?
No, he retired. He retired
Okay.
in February.
Okay, so that's probably going to be replaced by someone,
Yeah.
but okay. But so these are all requirements on the transcript at least. For ecology, you're obviously going to use your ecology elective. You only need one class in that category. For zoology, you're going to be getting a bunch of credits from your general biology electives that are spread into this. And because you only need 9 credits, and most zoology or most animal electives that you'd be taking, because you need to take 2, are 4-credit classes, you only need to take one of them and put them in this. So that could be things like animal physiology, or if you wanted to take both ornithology and ichthyology, or both ornithology and mammalogy, you could put one in one category and one in the other, just to fill things up. Botany is something that throws a lot of people. We need to take forest and shrub ID, I believe, still in the wildlife thing, and that's good because it actually states in the requirements for the certificate program that one of your botany courses needs to be a taxonomy or an identification course. So you're going to use that, and then you're going to need, this is in orange here, one of the additional courses that you'll need to be taking. So for me, you can make a lot of things botany. It can be an actual botany course. I ended up taking orchards management in Stockbridge. So I spent like a fall semester going out and picking apples and learning about the different types of apples and making cider. And that all counted towards botany. You could also take, anything that's really in plant related. You've already taken your taxonomy course. I will say that if you are worried about a course either counting or not counting towards a specific category, there's a email. So where you actually send in your certificate application is, I believe it's certificate@wildlifesociety.org. Don't quote me on that. I will send the correct email to you in an email after this talk. But that's actually a monitored email account by one of the people who kind of coordinates the whole certificate thing. So she's very helpful in saying, that course doesn't really sound like it'll fit here because of this or this reason. Maybe look for something else to try to fit in that category. So when you're building your course load for the semester, if something sounds like it's towing the line of maybe not being in the correct category, that's definitely a resource to use. Is just reach out to her, because she's very, very, very helpful. So your physical science electives are mostly going to be chemistry, earth sciences, and your physical science electives. So those are all electives that we need to take at UMass for our degree anyways. So you can just boing, 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 fit them in there. You need to take a stats elective at UMass, so that'll go into your basic statistics, quantitative sciences. You can use your intro math elective and your quantitative elective. These are all things that are on your transcript that are just like, pick something that fits in this category, and you just need to double check that it fits both in the category towards your degree and in the category towards your certificate, but most of them will. Humanities and social sciences, like I said, anything will fit into that if it's non-science. Communications, usually it's going to be both your writing courses, like I said, so those are 3 points each. You need to take one communications elective at UMass, so make sure to pick something that will go towards this category for that. That's one of the really trickier parts. And then you need to take a second one, not for UMass, but for the certificate. So that's the other additional class that you need to take. And then finally, like I said, policy and administration, whatever you choose for your IE elective will probably count towards this, but you want to make sure. If it's something like environmental decision making or something along those lines, usually it will count towards this. Or it will count towards this, not usually, it straight up will. And then natural resource policy is also something that we need to take. So they're easy to fit there. And so that's pretty much what I had to say about the certificate program. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anybody have on that or on anything else related to things, whether it's the certificate, whether it's grad school, other general questions, getting internships. Want to ask me things about myself, I don't think that's a great use of time, but I'm more than happy to just vibe. But yeah, does anybody have any specific questions? Do we see anything in chat?
Before anyone asks any questions, I will say a couple of things. So I think it should be clear to state that this certificate is really applicable for students who are on the wildlife ecology track in NRC. If you're on any of the other tracks, your intro NRC courses or general requirements may satisfy some of these electives, but it will become difficult for your upper levels because you're going to be specializing within that track. So if you're outside of NRC, then this certificate really won't be applicable to you. But even if you are NRC, you really have to be more on the wildlife ecology track, unless you're taking all these classes, or maybe you are taking courses that could be applicable to the certificate. I'll say one thing, Connor, that your spreadsheet I like it how it's more color coded than the one that I have. And if you don't mind sending me like a blank copy of that spreadsheet so I can share to people who are interested.
Sure, I'll send you both the blank one and the one with the stand-ins for
Okay.
the wildlife the wildlife tract stuff.
So I'll say a couple other things too. In basically, if you're in the wildlife ecology tract, all the classes, as Connor said, should be applicable. You are going to need to take an extra botany elective, and you will need to take another communication. I'll say from personal experience, I took a communication class in the communication department, media and society, that was more on the theory of communication and really wasn't applicable to this certificate. So then I had to go and retake another communication elective, which was another comm class, but it was on public speaking, which is applicable to this. So you really have to be careful as to what the requirements are specifically looking for, and do your courses match with that. I think the one hard thing in terms of applying outside of this is finding a letter of recommendation who is accredited. And I think what I'm going to probably do is meet with Lena and try and see if there are professors in NRC or maybe bio who are accredited, unless Connor, other than Todd Fuller, I don't know anyone else who would be. So unless Connor, you know anyone else.
So I'll speak to a couple of the things that you said before we take questions. Sorry. But so I had a very similar experience to George, where I had emailed the certificate and I said, hey, I'm taking this communications course. Do you think it will count? And I was like a week or 2 weeks into the semester, and then I got an email back that was like, no, that will not count, because it was again on the theory and of communication and not on improving communication as a whole. So I ended up dropping that class and taking another one the following semester. So yes, do be very careful of that. Secondly, in regards to, yes, this is mostly structured, or rather, I guess the wildlife curriculum at UMass is mostly structured towards this, but this is definitely a certificate that it's doable. It's more difficult to do if you're not on that track, but it is doable because there's a lot of overlap between different things. If you're on the general tract and you want to start taking wildlife specific courses, I think a lot of the fisheries kids have to take a lot of the same classes as wildlife, like we have to take a lot of the same classes as fisheries. And even I think kids in Sci, if they, I know a lot of the kids in Sci end up switching to NRC within their second or third year if they want to do wildlife stuff anyways. But if you were in Sci and you had the idea that, I want to do still envi-sci related stuff, but more focused with a wildlife spin. I think there's enough overlap in courses where you could potentially, if you decided early on that this was something you wanted to do, it might involve more than just those 2 additional courses, but it'd still probably be doable. You just need to plan it out early on. And then I had one other thing to say, but I entirely forget what it is. So I forget, what was George's last point? What did you say?
About the who is accredited in UMass for letter
Oh, yes, great.
recommendation.
So there's actually a database online. It's all public record of who within the Wildlife Society, who is accredited with each of these certificates. And you can filter by state and you can filter by region. I don't think I saw anybody else at UMass, but you can definitely see, like, you can go through and go, oh, that was one of my old bosses, or XYZ and the other thing. And that's a decent way without having to email 100 people like I did, and to figure out who you want to ask to be your letters of recommendation. So that's a good resource for that. And I can find that and send it to you guys after the talk.
And I'll say this is more of a question for Connor, but essentially there is no really, you can't apply for this certificate until you graduate. So it's something you don't have to worry about until the semester. So after you graduate, is there a certain time frame in which you have to apply? Say if you go 5 years after graduating, could you still apply for the certificate, or is that too long of a window?
So that's a great question. So yes, one of the requirements, I don't know if I stated this, one of the requirements is a bachelor's degree in wildlife biology or a related field. So you can't apply for this until you have graduated and got your degree. There is no time limit on applying for the Associate Wildlife Biologist Certificate. However, once you get past being a recent graduate, which I don't know what they categorize as that, I don't know if it's a year or something along those lines, the price for the certificate application goes from $95 to I think $115, which is, $25 isn't the end of the world, but I would like to save it where I can, because I am a graduate student and I am very poor.
And I will say too, your membership, I believe it also, for the Wildlife Society, it also
it also goes up once
yes.
you're not a student.
So I think that if you are in good position, you're able to find a letter of recommendation that is accredited. The best thing to do, I think, would be to apply right after you graduate if you have your student membership within that year. So for example, I renewed my membership back in the fall, and that's applicable to next fall. So if I apply for the wildlife or this certificate, then I would have to register for like an $80 membership or pay slightly more money, like the 115 versus the $90. So it is, I think the hardest part is finding someone who is accredited. If you've been working out in the field for a couple years and maybe you work with someone who is, then that would be easier. Say wait a couple years and apply and just pay the additional cost. But other than that, it seems like the process is pretty straightforward, especially if you're in the wildlife track. It is doable if you're in Envi-Sci or the other concentrations. But yeah, I'm kind of losing where I'm going here, but
that's all right.
Yeah, I guess if
questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, George.
I was gonna say no. If anyone else has any questions, please speak up. So
I just have a question.
Yeah.
To become a member of the Wildlife Society, like, were you one prior to applying for the application? Like, say you become a member, like, would they be deterred from seeing your application like, oh, they're just applying just because they want the certificate, or do they encourage people to join at the time of applying for the application?
So I was already a member, but that's just because if you become an officer of the student chapter of the Wildlife Society, then they require you to be a member of the national organization to sort of, spread the word, if you will. I do not think they would be deterred if you signed up and then immediately applied for the thing. I don't think it really works like that. I think as long as you're meeting the requirements, they're not going to vet you super hard.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
And I believe this was mentioned, I believe, earlier, but for membership, if you are still at UMass, it's like $45 per year. And I believe you had a figure earlier, Connor, but it goes up to what, $80? So it's double the
82.
so it's like double the price too. That is one of the drawbacks. I know if that could be a big constraint for some people, so it's definitely need to take into financial account for that if this is something that you really want to go for. But
Absolutely. I will say that beyond just being accredited with something like this, it is beneficial to be a part of your professional organizations to whatever it is you're doing, whether it's in the vet world, whether it's in the fisheries world with the Society of American Fisheries, whether it's in just the Wildlife Society in general, or whether you're doing something more specific like the Society of Fisheries and Society of Ichthyology and Herpetology. I'm sure mammals has their own specific society, things like that. Being involved with your own professional organization, I know is cost restrictive, which is a huge bummer, but usually students get discounts and things like that. And it is beneficial just to keeping in the know of what's going on in your field of study. And every grad student and every advisor that I've ever talked to has said that if you're in a position where you can be involved with your professional societies, particularly if you're moving on from undergrad and still want to be actively involved in the field, and you know that this is what you want to do, then you should do that. Maybe not if you're a sophomore, maybe you can wait. But yeah. Anybody else have questions, thoughts? Anything else?
doesn't have to be about the certificate to grad school,
Can be
anything.
about anything. I got another 20 minutes that I can talk about my thesis if people want to sit and listen to that, but I don't know if y'all want to do that.
And like I had said earlier, we are recording this meeting, and I'm going to be sharing the link as soon as I can with everyone so that you can rewatch it if there was any parts specifically that you want to listen to again. And
I will say, and I'll jump in real quick
yeah,
here. Sorry, George. The Wildlife Society themselves have on the certificate website a like hour-long Zoom that they have more, which repeats a lot of the information that I stated here. It's a recorded Zoom lecture. They have like an FAQ and things like that, but that one goes on both the Associate Wildlife Biologist thing as well as the Certified Wildlife Biologist thing. So it's a lot more information that you might not be super concerned with now, and a lot more general, I guess. But there's a lot of information there that if you have an hour that you want to sit down and watch another presentation from the actual Wildlife Society and hear what they have to say, then that's another resource that you can look into. And there's a lot of stuff online as well, just documents and stuff like that you can look into. But also give out my email. If you want to email me about any of these topics, or I guess any of these topics, then feel free to do so. I'm more than happy to be a resource for you guys.
Connor, do you want to put your email in the chat? It's
Sure, I can do that.
Well, if anyone has any questions, you feel free to stick on and ask. If you have to go, that's totally fine. One thing I'll say, if you are in Massachusetts and are planning on driving tonight, keep an eye out on the roads. They're likely conditions are pretty good right now. There'll be stuff like wood frogs or salamanders that could be crossing the road. So just keep an eye out if you are driving out tonight, or if you want to go look for them. Tonight's a good night to do that as well. So. I'm
Yeah.
I'm probably going to stop. If there are no more questions, I'm probably going to stop the recording now, and
Yeah.
feel free to stay on or head out if you have to. So
Absolutely.